Naples, April 1987. 80,000 people packed the stadium that night, and Diego Maradona saw only 3 faces. They sat in the front row. Center section, dark suits, hands folded, not watching the ball, watching him. The Camorra bosses never came to matches. But tonight they did. The message was very clear. Diego had the ball at his feet. 40 seconds left on the clock. His team was up by 1. All he had to do was hold possession, run down the time, win clean. He looked at the 3 men sitting there. One of them smiled. Diego touched the ball forward, straight toward his own goal. Why the Camorra called an emergency meeting at 3 in the morning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Naples, April 1987. 80,000 people packed the stadium that night, and Diego Maradona saw only 3 faces. They sat in the front row. Center section, dark suits, hands folded, not watching the ball, watching him. The Camorra bosses never came to matches, but tonight they did. The message was very clear. Diego had the ball at his feet. 40 seconds left on the clock. His team was up by 1. All he had to do was hold possession, run down the time, win clean. He looked at the 3 men sitting there. One of them smiled. Diego touched the ball forward, straight toward his own goal. Why the Camorra called an emergency meeting at 3 in the morning. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Naples, 6 months earlier, October 1986, Diego Maradona woke every morning to the sound of the city chanting his name, not metaphorically, actually chanting. The streets below his villa carried voices like a tide rising with the dawn, calling to him before the sun cleared the bay. He stood at his bedroom window that October morning and watched Naples wake up. Laundry lines stretched between buildings like prayers. Old women hung sheets from balconies. Fishermen unloaded their night's catch at the harbor. Every single one of them wore the blue Napoli jersey with his number 10 on the back. Claudia stirred behind him in bed. "They're already out there," she said. "They never leave." His wife pulled the covers up and smiled. She had learned to love the madness, or at least to accept it. When you marry a man who escaped the slums of Buenos Aires by kicking a ball, you marry the dream along with him. Their daughters, Dalma and Giannina, slept in the room next door. 5 and 3 years old, too young to understand what their father meant to this city. Too young to know that their last name carried weight that could crush or lift, depending on how the wind blew. Diego walked to his study. On the shelf, between trophies that gleamed like captured starlight, sat a football, not like the others. This one was old, leather cracked and faded, patches held together with wire twisted by his father's hands when Diego was 7 years old. The ball from Villa Fiorito, from the dirt streets where he learned that football was not a game but a language spoken by people who had nothing else to say to the world. He picked it up, turned it over. The leather still held the shape of his childhood feet. Claudia appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're thinking about home again," she said. "I'm thinking about what home cost." She handed him the cup. They stood together looking at the ball that should have fallen apart decades ago but somehow refused to die. "The girls want to play football this afternoon," Claudia said. "Then we'll play." That afternoon, Diego sat in the grass of their garden and watched his daughters kick the ball between them. Dalma had his instinct. She moved like water finding cracks. Giannina had his stubbornness. When she fell, she got up angry. He thought about his own father, a factory worker who never made enough money to fix the roof, who saved for months to buy Diego his first real football, who told him that God gave people 2 kinds of gifts, the gift of making things and the gift of being something others needed to see. "You have the second one," his father had said. "Don't waste it on people who want to own it." Diego hadn't understood then. He was 8 years old and only wanted to play. He understood now. Dalma kicked the ball to him. Diego trapped it with his chest, let it drop to his feet, flicked it back to her without using his hands. She squealed with joy. A black Mercedes pulled up to the gate. Diego saw it through the hedges, saw the driver get out and speak into a radio, saw the way the man's jacket hung heavy on one side. Claudia noticed Diego's expression change. "Who is it?" she said. "Probably just another reporter." But reporters didn't carry guns under their jackets. The Mercedes drove away. Diego made a note of the license plate in his mind. The way he made notes of defensive formations before matches. The way he cataloged everything that might matter later. That evening, Diego drove to training at the San Paulo Stadium. His car, a red Ferrari that the club president gave him, moved through Naples like a parade. People stopped on sidewalks, children ran alongside. Old men who had supported Napoli for 50 years without ever seeing them win anything touched the car as it passed like it was blessed. At a stoplight, a man on a Vespa pulled up beside him, knocked on the window. Diego rolled it down. The man pulled off his helmet. He was crying. "My son," the man said, "he was born with a hole in his heart. The doctors said he wouldn't live, but he lived. He's 6 now. Every Sunday he wears your jersey. He thinks you're the reason he's alive." Diego didn't know what to say. What do you say when someone tells you their faith in you is keeping their child alive? "Tell him to keep fighting," Diego said. The light turned green. The man put his helmet back on and drove away. At the training facility, Diego's teammate Marco waited in the parking lot. He leaned against a BMW that cost more than most Neapolitans made in 5 years. Marco came from money. Old Milanese money that bought football clubs the way other families bought vacation homes. "You're late," Marco said. "Traffic. There's always traffic. You just like the attention." They walked toward the facility together. Inside, the locker room smelled like liniment and leather and the specific type of sweat that comes from men pushing their bodies to the edge of what's possible. Diego's locker had a new lock on it. "Did you change your lock?" Marco asked. "No." The equipment manager appeared. A nervous man named Giuliano, who had worked for Napoli for 20 years and treated the players' equipment like religious artifacts. "Don Presidente requested we upgrade security," Giuliano said for the expensive items. Diego looked at Marco. Marco raised his eyebrows. After training, Diego stayed late practicing free kicks. The stadium was empty, just him and the net and the sound of his foot meeting the ball. The sound that had defined his entire existence. He heard footsteps on the pitch behind him. Antonio emerged from the tunnel, the team's veteran defender. Neapolitan born and raised. A man whose grandfather had worked the docks and whose father had driven a taxi and who became a professional footballer through the kind of luck that feels like destiny until it doesn't. "You planning to stay here all night?" Antonio said. "Maybe." Antonio walked to the penalty spot and stood beside him. "I need to tell you something," Antonio said, "but I need you to not react." Diego said nothing, just looked at his friend. 6 weeks ago, a man came to see me," Antonio said. "Well-dressed, polite. He said he represented some people who care about Napoli's success. He said they wanted to ensure we performed well in important matches. He offered me money. A lot of money. What did you say?" I said no. Then he told me about my brother. Diego knew about Antonio's brother. Everyone on the team knew. He had been a detective. Died 3 years ago in a car accident on a road he had driven 1,000 times. "He said my brother made a similar choice," Antonio said, "and that sometimes saying no costs more than saying yes. Did you report it?" Antonio laughed. Not with humor, with the sound of a man who knows how the world actually works. "Report it to who? The police? Half of them are on the same payroll." They stood in silence. The stadium lights hummed above them. "Why are you telling me this?" Diego said. "Because they came to see you 6 weeks ago too. Didn't they?" Diego didn't answer. He lined up another ball and struck it. The shot curved around an invisible wall and hit the top corner of the net. "They're going to come back," Antonio said, "and next time they won't be polite." Diego drove home alone. The streets were darker now, fewer people, the celebratory energy of the afternoon replaced by something else, something that moved in the spaces between streetlights. A black sedan followed him from the training facility. Different car than the Mercedes from the morning. Same weight to how it moved. Diego took 4 unnecessary turns. The sedan stayed behind him. He pulled into his driveway. The sedan stopped at the end of the block, waited. Inside, Claudia had put the girls to bed. She sat in the living room reading a magazine about furniture, trying to make their villa feel like a home instead of a museum to Diego's success. "Good training?" she asked. "Fine." He poured himself a whiskey, stood at the window. The sedan was still there. Claudia came up behind him. "What's wrong?" she said. Nothing. Diego. He turned to face her, his wife, the woman who had stayed with him through everything, through the poverty and the sudden wealth, through the women who threw themselves at him and the men who wanted to own him, through the nights he came home angry at the world and took it out on everyone except the people who deserved it. Someone's interested in me, he said, for the wrong reasons. What kind of someone? The kind that doesn't take no for an answer. The phone rang. At 11:47 at night. Nobody called that late unless something was wrong. Diego picked it up. Silence on the other end. Not dead air. Someone breathing. Someone listening. Hello? Diego said. The line went dead. He hung up, looked at Claudia, saw the fear in her eyes that she tried to hide. Wrong number, he said, but they both knew it wasn't. Naples, Diego's home, 11:47 p.m. 3 days later, Diego couldn't sleep. He stood in his study with the lights off, watching the street through a gap in the curtains. The black sedan had been replaced by a different car, a Lancia, dark blue. 2 men inside. They changed cars but never left. At midnight, the Lancia drove away. Diego waited, watched. 20 minutes later, a motorcycle arrived. One rider, parked under a broken streetlight where the shadows were thickest. This was how they worked, how they made you understand you were always being watched without ever needing to say it. The doorbell rang. Diego's hand went to the knife he kept in his desk drawer, a habit from Villa Fiorito. In the slums, you learned that unexpected visits after dark were never friendly. He walked to the front door, looked through the peephole. Nobody there. He opened the door. The street was empty. The motorcycle was gone. On his doorstep sat an envelope, unmarked, no address, no stamp, hand-delivered. Diego picked it up. The paper was expensive, heavy, the kind of envelope that carries things that matter. He closed the door, locked it, walked back to his study. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a single photograph. His daughter Dalma, walking out of her school, wearing her blue backpack with a cartoon rabbit on it, smiling at something, unaware that someone across the street was photographing her with a lens powerful enough to count the freckles on her cheeks. No note, no demand, no threat written in words. None was needed. Diego sat down. The photograph fell from his hands to the desk. He thought about the man who had come to see him 6 weeks earlier. It had been after a match against Juventus. A win, 3-1. Diego had scored twice. The city was celebrating. The locker room was chaos, music and champagne and grown men acting like children because that's what victory allows. A club official had appeared in the doorway. Younger than Diego. Expensive suit, the kind of smooth face that comes from never having worked with your hands. Don Presidente wants to see you, the official had said. In the president's office, 3 men had been waiting. The president, nervous as always, pouring wine that cost more than Diego's father made in a year. And 2 others, one in his 60s, silver hair, hands that looked like they had held important things. The other younger, quiet, the kind of man who watches everything and says nothing. Diego, the president had said, these gentlemen represent some businessmen who are very invested in Napoli's success. The older man had smiled. We're great admirers of your work, he had said. What you've done for this city is remarkable. We simply want to ensure that success continues. I appreciate that, Diego had said. We believe in partnerships, the man had continued, in understanding that success comes from cooperation. Sometimes there are matches where the outcome is particularly important to various parties, financial parties, and ensuring the right outcome can be beneficial to everyone involved. Diego had understood immediately. He had grown up watching men like this operate in Buenos Aires. Different accents, same language. I play football, Diego had said. I don't fix matches. The man's smile had not changed. We're not asking you to lose. We're asking you to win. By specific margins, at specific times. You'd be doing what you already do, just with more awareness of timing. No, the younger man had finally spoken. Perhaps you misunderstand the nature of the offer. I understand perfectly, Diego had said. The answer is no. He had walked out. The president had called after him. Diego had not turned around. For 2 weeks nothing had happened. Diego had thought maybe that was the end of it. Maybe they had accepted his answer. Then the surveillance began, the cars, the motorcycles, the men who appeared at training and stood at the edges of the parking lot, never approaching, just present. Diego had told himself he could ignore it. that eventually they would move on to someone else, someone weaker, someone who needed the money. Now he stared at the photograph of his daughter. Ignoring it was no longer an option. He picked up the phone, thought about calling the police, put the phone down. In Naples, calling the police about the Camorra was like asking a fish to arrest the ocean. He burned the photograph in the fireplace. Watched his daughter's face curl and blacken in the flames. Claudia appeared in the doorway. "What are you burning?" she said. "Nothing important." She looked at him, really looked. The way she had looked at him when they first met, and she was trying to decide if he was worth the risk. "You're lying," she said. "Yes. Is it going to get worse?" Diego thought about the men in the president's office, about Antonio's brother, about the way the older man had smiled when Diego said no. "I don't know," he said, but he did know. The next morning at training, Diego noticed two men watching from the parking lot. They wore casual clothes, jeans and leather jackets, but they stood like soldiers, straight, alert, scanning. Marco saw them too. "They're not reporters," Marco said. "I know. Should we tell someone? Who?" After training, Diego found Antonio in the shower room. The only place in the facility without cameras or microphones. The only place where you could speak without wondering who was listening. "They sent me a photograph," Diego said. Antonio turned off the water. "Of what?" "My daughter." Antonio dried himself slowly, methodically, taking time to think. "Then it's begun," Antonio said, the part where they stop asking politely. "What did you do when they came to you?" "I have one child, a son. He has leukemia. The treatments cost more than I make in 3 years." Antonio sat down on the bench. They offered to make the debt disappear. "All of it. I just had to make sure certain goals weren't prevented." "Are you doing it?" "I already did it, 2 matches ago, against Roma." Diego remembered that match. They had won 3-1. Antonio had been unusually passive on defense. Diego had thought he was injured. "I'm sorry," Antonio said. "Don't be sorry, be careful." That evening, Diego received a call from the club president. "Diego, we need to talk about tomorrow's match." "What about it?" "There will be some special guests in attendance. Important people. Very important to the club's financial situation." "Who?" The president paused. "People it would be wise not to disappoint." Diego hung up. He looked out his window. The motorcycle was back. Different rider. Same purpose. Tomorrow's match was against Roma. A crucial match for the season standings. The kind of match that meant everything to the fans and the club. Apparently it meant something to other people, too. Diego walked to his daughter's room, watched them sleep. Dalma holding her stuffed rabbit. Janina's thumb in her mouth, even though she was getting too old for it. He had brought them to Italy to give them a better life, to show them that their father had become something. Someone. Now someone was using them to make him become something else. Diego made a decision. He would play tomorrow. He would not be intimidated, and somehow he would find a way to protect his family while still being the man they needed him to be. The motorcycle's engine started outside. The rider circled the block 3 times before driving away. The message was clear. "We know where you sleep." Naples, various locations. Day before the match, Diego woke before dawn and drove to the club president's house in Posillipo, the neighborhood where Naples kept its money, where the streets were clean and the buildings didn't have laundry hanging from windows and you could pretend the rest of the city didn't exist. The president's wife answered the door in a silk robe. She looked surprised, then afraid. "Is everything all right?" she said. "I need to speak with your husband. It's 5:30 in the morning. I know what time it is." The president came downstairs 10 minutes later. He had dressed quickly. His shirt was buttoned wrong. They sat in his study. Dark wood and leather chairs and oil paintings of men in military uniforms from wars nobody remembered. "Coffee?" the president offered. "No." The president poured himself a cup. His hands shook. Coffee spilled on the saucer. "I assume this is about the guests," he said. "Tell me who they are." "Diego, there are some questions that are dangerous to answer." "More dangerous than not knowing?" The president sat down. He looked older than he had the day before, worn down by something heavy he had been carrying too long. "When I bought this club," he said, "I thought I was buying a football team. I didn't understand I was buying into a system, a structure that was here long before me and will be here long after." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you." The president drank his coffee. The people attending tomorrow's match have invested heavily in Napoli's success. They've provided loans when banks wouldn't, they've made problems disappear, they've ensured that referees see what they should see and miss what they should miss. In exchange for what? Control. The kind of control that doesn't show up in contracts. Diego stood up, walked to the window. The sun was rising over the bay. The city looked beautiful from up here. Clean, organized, nothing like the truth beneath it. What happens if I refuse to cooperate? Diego said. I don't know. I've never seen anyone refuse. Diego left without saying goodbye. He drove to Antonio's apartment in the Quartiere Spagnoli, the Spanish Quarter, where the streets were narrow enough to touch both walls at once, and every building leaned against its neighbor like tired old men. Antonio's wife let him in. She didn't ask questions, just pointed upstairs. Antonio was eating breakfast with his son. The boy was thin, 9 years old but looked 7. The leukemia was eating him from the inside. Uncle Diego, the boy said. Diego forced a smile, sat down, let the boy show him his collection of football cards. I have 3 of you, the boy said proudly. Papa says you're the best player in the world. Your papa is very kind. After breakfast, after Antonio's wife took the boy to the hospital for treatment, Diego and Antonio sat in the kitchen. I need to understand something, Diego said. Your brother. Tell me what really happened. Antonio opened a drawer, pulled out a police badge. It was dusty, the leather holder cracked. Lorenzo gave me this badge when he graduated from the academy, Antonio said. He was so proud, he thought he was going to clean up the city, make it better for his nephew. Antonio held the badge like it was made of glass. He started investigating match fixing, small stuff at first, lower leagues, but he found connections, money flowing from the Camorra through shell companies into clubs. He built a case. What happened? They offered him money to stop. He refused. They threatened his family. He still refused. Antonio put the badge back in the drawer. Then one night he was driving home from work. His brakes failed on a hill. His car went through a guardrail. They said it was mechanical failure, but it wasn't. The mechanic who inspected the car before the accident had worked on it 2 days earlier. Everything was fine. The mechanic who inspected it after said the brake line had corroded. That mechanic retired to Sicily the next month, bought a villa. Diego understood. The same story, different details, the same ending. Why didn't you leave Naples? Diego asked. Antonio laughed. And go where? You think this only happens here? My brother's last words to me were, the system isn't local, it's everywhere. The only question is whether you're inside it or beneath it. Diego drove to a payphone. He didn't trust his home phone anymore, didn't trust his car phone, didn't trust anything that could be monitored. He called an old friend in Buenos Aires, a journalist named Raúl who had covered Diego's early career, a man who still believed that exposing corruption could change things. Raúl answered on the 3rd ring. Diego? I need advice. About what? About men who think they own everything. The line went silent, not dead, but quiet in the way that means someone is listening who shouldn't be. Diego, Raúl said carefully, whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. These aren't the kind of people you fight. These are the kind of people you survive. What if I can't survive without fighting? Then you die. The line went completely dead. Cut mid-sentence. Diego stood in the payphone booth for a long time, watching people walk past, normal people with normal problems, jobs they hated, bills they couldn't pay, marriages that were dying. But nobody was photographing their children. Nobody was watching them sleep. He drove to a church. He hadn't been inside one in years, not since his mother dragged him there as a child in Buenos Aires. But he needed to be somewhere that felt separate from the world he was living in. The church was empty except for an old priest arranging flowers at the altar. The man moved slowly, carefully, the way people move when their bones hurt but they refuse to admit it. Diego sat in a pew. The priest saw him, walked over, sat down without asking permission. I know who you are, the priest said. Everyone does. But you don't know who I am. Should I? No, that's my point. I've lived in Naples for 40 years. I've buried more people than I've baptized. I've watched this city eat its children and call it progress. They sat in silence, the kind of silence that only exists in churches. Heavy, expectant. I need to know something, Diego said. When good men stand up to evil, does God protect them? The priest thought about this. I used to tell people yes. I used to believe that righteousness was a shield. Then I buried men who were more righteous than I'll ever be. Men who stood up, men who fought. What do you tell people now? I tell them that God doesn't promise protection. He promises meaning, and that sometimes the meaning costs everything. Diego left the church no wiser than when he entered, but he understood something he hadn't before. There was no answer that would make this easier, no prayer that would make the danger disappear, no authority that could protect him. He was alone in this, the way he had always been alone, even when he was surrounded by 80,000 people chanting his name. When he got home, Claudia was packing suitcases. "What are you doing?" Diego said. "We're leaving. Tonight." "Claudia, don't tell me it's safe. Don't tell me you have it under control. I saw the men watching our house. I heard you on the phone. I'm not stupid." She threw clothes into the suitcase, not folding them, just throwing. "We're going to Buenos Aires," she said. "For a month, maybe longer, until this is finished. I can't leave right now. Then we'll go without you." Diego grabbed her arm, not hard, just firm enough to make her stop and look at him. "If you run, they'll know they can control me," he said. "They'll know all they have to do is threaten you, and I'll do whatever they want." "And if we stay? What then? We wait for them to do more than threaten?" Diego had no answer for that. Claudia pulled her arm free. "After tomorrow's match," Diego said. "Give me until after the match. Then we'll all go, together, I promise. Your promises don't stop bullets. One more day." She looked at him, really looked, searching for something, some reason to believe this wouldn't end badly. "One day," she said, "then we're gone." That night, Diego stood in his daughter's doorway and watched them sleep. Dalma was reading under her covers with a flashlight. She thought he couldn't see. He let her believe it. Janina talked in her sleep, fragments of sentences that didn't make sense, something about a rabbit and a castle and chocolate milk. They were so young, so unaware of how fragile safety really was, how quickly the world could turn from something that holds you to something that crushes you. Diego thought about his own childhood, the hunger that was constant, the cold that came through walls that weren't built right. His mother crying in the kitchen because there wasn't enough food. His father working 16-hour days and coming home too tired to speak. He had sworn his children would never know that they would grow up safe and fed and loved. Now safety was a lie, and the men who wanted to take it away were powerful enough to do it. But they weren't powerful enough to make him surrender. Not yet. Diego closed the door, went to his study, sat in the dark. Tomorrow he would play the most important match of his life, and it had nothing to do with football. Naples. Match day. 4:13 p. Diego arrived at San Paulo Stadium 4 hours before kickoff. He always came early. It was a ritual. Time to think, time to prepare, time to transform from a man into whatever the match required him to become. But today the stadium felt wrong, more security than usual. Men in dark suits with earpieces standing at every entrance. Not stadium security, something else, private, professional. In the parking lot, Diego saw 3 Mercedes sedans parked in spaces reserved for VIPs. The kind of cars that cost more than most people's houses. The kind of cars that came with drivers who carried guns. Marco met him at the players' entrance. "You feel it?" Marco said. "Feel what?" "Like something bad is about to happen." Inside, the locker room was quiet. Usually before a big match, the energy was loud. Music, laughter, insults traded back and forth, the kind of chaos that comes from nervous excitement. Today, nothing. Players changed into their uniforms in silence. Some of them wouldn't look at Diego. Others looked at him too long, like they were trying to memorize his face before something happened to it. Diego opened his locker. Someone had left a note taped to the inside of the door. It said, "Play smart." No signature, no explanation. Diego crumpled it and threw it in the trash. Franco, the team captain, sat on the bench tying his cleats. He was 40 years old. Too old to be playing, but too good to quit. His hands were shaking. Diego sat beside him. "You all right?" Diego said. "No. What's wrong?" Franco finished tying his cleats, stood up, motioned for Diego to follow him. They walked to the shower room, the only place without cameras, the only place where conversations stayed private. Franco turned on all the showers. The sound of water hitting tile echoed off the walls, loud enough to drown out voices. "They came to me last week," Franco said. "The same people who came to you. What did they want? They wanted guarantees. About today's match, about the final score. They said if we win by less than 2 goals, certain things would happen. What things? Franco's eyes were wet, not from the shower spray, from something else. My son has leukemia. The treatments cost more than I make in 5 years. The hospital bills are drowning us. We had to take out loans from the wrong people. Diego understood immediately. They own your debt. They bought it 3 months ago. Then they came to me and said the debt could disappear, all of it. My son could get the best care in Europe. All I had to do was make sure certain results happened. And you agreed. What would you have done? Diego didn't answer. 2 matches ago, Franco continued, against Juventus, we won 3-1. You scored twice, remember? I remember. I was supposed to make sure we won by at least 2 goals. So I let you have more space. I didn't mark as tight on their forwards. I made it easier. Diego felt something cold settle in his chest. How many others? Diego said. I don't know, I don't ask. But I watch, and I see things. Players who used to fight for every ball suddenly going easy. Defenders who used to close every gap, leaving just enough room. They stood in the shower room, water running, steam rising. Are you going to do it today? Diego said. My son needs another round of treatment next month. If I don't, we can't pay for it. And if you do, then I'm a coward. But I'm a coward with a living son. Diego returned to the locker room. The coach was giving a pre-match speech about honor and history and fighting for the city, but the coach wouldn't look at Diego. He looked at everyone else. At the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at Diego. Diego realized the coach knew too. The team took the field for warm-ups at 5:47. The stadium was already half full. Fans arriving early, chanting, waving flags, believing in something that didn't exist anymore. Diego scanned the crowd, looking for the 3 men Antonio had warned him about, looking for the faces that would confirm everything. He didn't see them yet. He passed the ball back and forth with Marco, stretched, ran through drills his body could do without thinking. At 6:23 they arrived, 3 men, walking through the main entrance like they owned it, which Diego supposed they did. The first was older, silver hair, expensive suit. He moved like a man who had never been told no in his life. This was Salvatore Russo, the accountant, the man who turned crime into spreadsheets. The second was heavier, thick neck, hands like hammers, Don Carmine Esposito, the man who ran the Camorra's operations in central Naples. The man Antonio's brother had been investigating when he died. The third was younger, 30s, sharp suit, cold eyes, Marco Vitale, the engineer. They called him that because he built systems, smuggling routes, money laundering operations, corruption networks that ran so deep you couldn't pull them out without collapsing everything. They walked to their seats, front row, center section, the best seats in the stadium. Around them, other spectators noticed. People stood up, moved away, found other seats, created space. Nobody wanted to sit near them. Nobody wanted to be seen. Nobody wanted to be remembered. Within 5 minutes, the entire front section was empty except for the 3 men and 4 bodyguards who positioned themselves at the exits. The stadium announcer's voice came over the speakers, reading the welcome message, thanking sponsors, welcoming special guests. When he said special guests, his voice cracked. Diego looked at the family section. Claudia was there with Dalma and Giannina. They were wearing matching blue jerseys with Diego's number. They were waving at him. Behind them, standing against the wall, was a 4th man, younger, wearing jeans and a leather jacket, his hands in his pockets, not watching the field, watching Diego's family. Diego's vision narrowed, his hearing muffled. Everything disappeared except that man standing too close to his daughters. A man in a headset approached Diego on the sideline. Stadium staff, or pretending to be. Maradona, the man said. Diego turned. Don Carmine wants you to know your family looks beautiful today. The words hit Diego like a fist, not the words themselves, the meaning beneath them. We can reach them any time we want. Diego looked at the 3 men sitting in the front row. Don Carmine was watching him, not smiling, not threatening, just watching, making sure Diego understood. Diego looked back at the family section. The man in the leather jacket was still there, still watching. He raised one hand, waved, a friendly gesture that meant something completely different. The referee's whistle blew, sharp, final, time to start. Diego walked to the center circle. The Roma captain was already there, an older player named Giancarlo who had been in Serie A for 15 years. They shook hands. Good luck, Giancarlo said. But his eyes said something else. They said, "I'm sorry for what's about to happen." The referee placed the ball on the center spot. Diego looked around the stadium. 80,000 people. All of them believing this was real. All of them thinking what happened in the next 90 minutes mattered because of goals and tactics and skill. None of them knew this was theater, that the outcome had been decided before anyone stepped on the field. Diego looked at the three men in the front row. Don Carmine nodded, a small gesture, permission, or a command. Diego thought about his daughters, about the man standing behind them, about all the people who had tried to stand up and failed, about Antonio's brother, about the priest who had buried more people than he baptized. He thought about the note in his locker, "Play smart." Smart meant survival. Smart meant protecting his family. Smart meant doing what they wanted and living to see tomorrow. But smart also meant surrender. It meant teaching his daughters that power always wins, that the strong eat the weak and the only choice is which one you are. The referee blew his whistle. The match began, and Diego Maradona made a decision about who he was going to be. Match, 38th minute score, Napoli 1, Roma 0. Diego had the ball at his feet. Roma's defense collapsed around him. 3 players, closing the space, forcing him wide. Except they weren't really closing the space. Diego saw it, the gaps they left, the angles they offered. The way the center back shifted his weight just enough to give Diego a clear path through the middle. It was subtle, professional. If you didn't know what to look for, you would think it was normal defending. Slightly tired, slightly slow. But Diego had played against Roma's defense before. Their center back was one of the best in Italy. He didn't make mistakes. He didn't leave gaps, not unless he was told to. Diego dribbled through the opening. Too easy. The goalkeeper came off his line, committed too early, left the near post exposed. Diego shot. The ball hit the back of the net. The stadium erupted. 80,000 people screaming, believing they had just witnessed genius. But Diego didn't celebrate. He walked back to the center circle, thinking. The Roma defenders had let him score, not obviously, not so clearly that anyone watching would notice, but they had created the conditions for the goal to happen. They had performed the possibility of failure. Diego looked at the 3 men in the front row. They weren't celebrating either, just watching, waiting for the next act. At halftime, the score was still 1-0. Napoli winning, but by less than the required margin. In the tunnel leading to the locker rooms, Diego saw the Roma captain walking ahead. Diego caught up to him, grabbed his arm, pulled him into an empty medical room. "What the hell are you doing out there?" Diego said. The Roma captain pulled his arm free. He was older than Diego, 42, playing his last season. A man who had seen everything and was tired of all of it. "The same thing you're doing," the captain said, "following orders." "I'm not following orders." The captain laughed, not with humor, with exhaustion. "Yes, you are. You just don't know it yet. You think you're the hero standing up to corruption. You're just another piece in a machine that's bigger than both of us. What are you talking about? My club owes money, real money, the kind that comes from people who don't accept late payments. 3 months ago, those people bought our debt. Then they came to our coach, then our captain, then half the team." Diego felt something cold spreading through his chest. "You're throwing the match. We're creating the right conditions for the match to go a certain way. There's a difference." "No, there isn't." The Roma captain walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "You know what the funny part is? Your team is doing the same thing. Half of them are in on it. Your captain, your sweeper, probably your coach. Everyone knows except you. You're lying." "Am I?" "Watch your teammates in the second half. Really watch them. See how they're always in the right position at the right time. How they give you just enough space to do what you do best. How they make it look like football when it's really just expensive theater." The door closed behind him. Diego stood in the empty medical room, smelling antiseptic and old sweat, hearing the crowd above chanting his name. All of it based on a lie. The second half began at 7:41. Diego did what the Roma captain suggested. He watched his own teammates, watched Franco marking Roma's striker, watched how he stayed just far enough away to make it look competitive but close enough to prevent obvious goals, watched his midfielder intercepting passes, but only certain passes, only the ones that would keep the game flowing but not change the momentum, watched the entire team moving in coordination, not with each other, with something invisible, something planned. At the 68th minute, Napoli scored again, then again, 3-0. Diego hadn't touched the ball in 20 minutes. Every time he called for it, his teammates passed to someone else. Every time he moved into space, they found a different option. They were freezing him out, protecting the result, making sure he couldn't do anything to disrupt the carefully arranged outcome. Don Carmine made a phone call from his seat, smiled, nodded to someone. At the 81st minute, Roma scored. Diego was on the far side of the field. He watched it happen, watched his teammate fail to clear a ball he could have cleared easily, watched it fall to a Roma forward, watched the forward shoot, watched his goalkeeper dive, but dive late, just late enough. The ball went in 3-1, the required margin maintained. Napoli winning by exactly 2 goals, the spread covered, the bet secure. The Roma players didn't celebrate their goal, they just jogged back to their positions, doing their job. Diego realized something that made him feel sick. He had thought he was standing against corruption. He had thought his refusal to cooperate mattered. But he was never given a choice. The system didn't need his permission. It just routed around him, used everyone else, made his defiance irrelevant. He was the only one who thought this was a fight. Everyone else knew it was just business. The clock showed 89 minutes, 1 minute of regular time remaining, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of stoppage time. Diego's teammate passed him the ball, finally. After freezing him out for most of the half, Diego trapped it, looked up, saw his path forward. He could pass it back, kill time, let the match end the way it was supposed to end. Or he could do something else. He looked at the 3 men sitting in the front row. They were relaxed now, confident. The outcome was secure. The system had worked perfectly despite Diego's resistance. Don Carmine was talking on his phone, probably already counting money, already planning the next match, the next bet, the next player who would need to be convinced. Marco leaned over and said something. They both laughed. Diego thought about Franco's son, about Antonio's brother, about the priest who buried good men who stood up, about Claudia packing bags, about his daughters sleeping with stuffed rabbits. He thought about the note in his locker, "Play smart." Smart meant survival. But survival meant dying in a different way. Diego made his decision. Not the smart one, the necessary one, match. Final 40 seconds, Diego stood at midfield with the ball at his feet. The clock showed 89 minutes and 20 seconds. Maybe 40 seconds of play remaining before the referee blew the final whistle. All he had to do was hold possession, pass it backwards, let his defenders waste time, run the clock down, let the match end the way everyone had planned it to end. Napoli 3. Roma 1. The perfect margin, the perfect result, the perfect crime disguised as sport. Franco ran toward him. Diego, pass it back. Diego didn't move, just stood there, ball at his feet. 80,000 people watching. The Roma players had stopped pressing. They knew the match was over. They were already thinking about the showers, about going home, about whatever money was waiting for them. Marco appeared on Diego's right. "Pass the ball," Marco said, his voice urgent now. "Diego, pass it." Diego looked at the 3 men in the front row. Don Carmine had put his phone away. He was watching now, leaning forward slightly. Something in his posture had changed. He sensed it, the possibility of disruption. Salvatore stood up, said something to one of the bodyguards. Diego touched the ball forward, not toward Roma's goal, toward his own. The stadium made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite confusion, something between the two. 80,000 people trying to understand what they were seeing. Franco ran in front of Diego, blocking his path. "What are you doing?" Diego moved around him, still dribbling, still heading toward his own goal. His teammates stopped moving, all of them, standing frozen, watching. The Roma players stopped too, not understanding. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't something anyone had planned for. Diego's goalkeeper, Paolo, came off his line. His face twisted in confusion. "Diego, what are you doing?" The television commentators were talking, confused, searching for explanations. Maradona seems disoriented. Perhaps he's exhausted. Perhaps the heat. He's moving the wrong direction. Diego was 30 meters from his own goal now. Paolo stood in his way, hands out, ready to stop anything. Diego could see everything, the entire stadium, every face, every reaction. He saw Claudia in the family section, her hand over her mouth, Dalma pulling at her mother's sleeve asking what was happening. He saw the man in the leather jacket moving closer to his family, hand reaching into his pocket. He saw Don Carmine standing now, not watching the field, watching Diego specifically, his face showing something Diego had never seen there before. Fear. Not of what Diego might do to the match. Fear of what it meant that Diego was doing it at all. Diego shot. The ball left his foot, curved, heading toward his own goal, toward the corner where Paulo couldn't reach it. But the curve was wrong, intentionally wrong. The ball hit the post, bounced away, out toward the sideline. A Roma player, confused by everything, instinctively kicked it out of bounds. The referee blew his whistle. Long and final. Full time. Napoli 3, Roma 1. The same result, the same score. But everything had changed. Diego's teammates surrounded him immediately. "Are you insane?" Marco grabbed his jersey. "Do you understand what you just did?" Franco's face was white, not angry, terrified. They saw that. They all saw that. Diego said nothing, just walked toward the tunnel. The crowd was still cheering. They didn't understand. They thought it was exhaustion, confusion, a mistake. Only a handful of people knew it wasn't. In the tunnel, stadium security was waiting, more than usual. They formed a corridor, directing Diego toward the locker room. But their hands were on their radios. Their eyes were alert. Something had been activated. The three men appeared at the end of the tunnel, standing in the shadows, waiting. Diego walked past them without looking, felt their eyes on his back, felt the weight of what he had just done settling on him like gravity. In the locker room, his teammates changed in silence. Nobody looked at him. Nobody spoke to him. They might as well have been ghosts. The coach entered. His face was pale. He looked like a man who had just received a death sentence. "Everyone out," the coach said, "except Diego." The team left, fast, like the room was on fire. The coach closed the door, locked it. "Do you know what you've done? I played football. You committed suicide." The coach's hands were shaking. They bet millions on this match, on the exact margin. 3-1 was perfect. If you had scored that own goal, made it 3-2, you would have cost them everything. I didn't score. But you tried. In front of 80,000 witnesses, you showed everyone that you could, that you would. So what happens now? The coach opened a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of whiskey, drank straight from it. "I don't know. Nobody's ever done what you just did. Nobody's been stupid enough. Or brave enough. There's no difference between those things when you're dead." The coach left, the door closed, the lock clicked. Diego sat alone in the locker room, still wearing his jersey, still sweating from the match. His phone rang, not his cell phone, the locker room phone, the one that only the coach and club officials used. Diego stared at it, watched it ring, knowing who it was. On the 7th ring, he picked it up, a voice he recognized, calm, almost friendly. "Diego Armando Maradona, Don Carmine." "I know who I am," Diego said. "Do you?" "Because what you just did suggests confusion about who you are, about how the world works, about what happens to people who embarrass powerful men in front of stadiums full of witnesses. I didn't embarrass anyone. The score stayed the same. The score is meaningless. You revealed that it could change, that you could change it, that our control isn't absolute. That's far worse than any goal. Silence on the line, not empty, filled with possibility. Your family," Don Carmine said, "your wife and daughters, they're at the Meridian Hotel. Room 407. My men are in the lobby." Diego's heart stopped. "If you hurt them, I'm not hurting anyone. Yet. I'm giving you an opportunity to explain yourself, face to face, via Tribunali 156. 1 hour, come alone. Or don't come at all and we'll visit your family instead." The line went dead. Diego sat holding the phone, hearing the dial tone, hearing his own breathing, hearing everything ending. Via Tribunali, Warehouse District, 12:41 a.m. Diego changed out of his football kit, put on jeans and a black shirt, no jewelry, no watch, nothing that identified him as someone special. He left through the player's entrance. A black car was waiting, engine running, driver wearing sunglasses even though it was past midnight. The drive took 17 minutes, through streets that grew darker and narrower, past buildings where windows had been bricked over, past corners where men stood in groups that dispersed when the car approached. The car stopped in front of a warehouse, old brick, no signs, no lights, the kind of building that existed in every port city, the kind that held things that didn't officially exist. 2 men stood by the door. They patted Diego down, found nothing, opened the door. Inside, the warehouse was mostly empty. Concrete floors, metal beams, the smell of salt water and old machinery. In the back corner, an office had been built. Light came from under the door. One of the men knocked twice, paused, knocked once more. A voice from inside said, "Come in." The office was small, a desk, 4 chairs, filing cabinets, maps of Naples on the walls with colored pins marking locations that probably meant something terrible. The 3 men sat behind the desk, Don Carmine in the center, Salvatore on his right, Marco on his left, like a tribunal, like judges about to pass sentence. "Sit," Don Carmine said. Diego remained standing. "I said sit, I heard you." Don Carmine smiled. The kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, the kind that meant violence was a possibility being held in reserve. In Naples, Don Carmine said, "We have a saying, the fish don't know they're in water until the water is gone. Do you understand what that means? I understand metaphors. It means you don't know you're in a system until someone shows you that you are. Tonight you tried to show everyone that our system has cracks, that it can be broken. I showed them it's not real. Nothing is real. Money is paper. Countries are lines on maps. Authority is just agreement. But we all pretend these things matter because the alternative is chaos. You threatened that pretense." Salvatore leaned forward. He had a folder in front of him. He opened it, pulled out papers. "Your contract with Napoli," Salvatore said. "We own 40% of it. Did you know that?" "I know the club has investors." "Not investors. Owners. We bought your contract through a shell company. Every time you step on that field, you're working for us. Then you own 40% of my legs, not my decisions." Marco laughed. It was the first time Diego had heard him speak. His voice was higher than expected, almost friendly. "You think this is about football? Football is just the product. The real business is control, information, leverage. We own judges, police captains, politicians. We own pieces of everything that matters, including you." "I'm not owned." Don Carmine stood up, walked around the desk. He moved slowly, like a man who had learned that speed was unnecessary when you controlled time itself. He stood close to Diego, close enough that Diego could smell his cologne. Expensive, the kind that cost more than Diego's father made in a year. "We can make your family disappear," Don Carmine said. "Not kill them. That's crude. We can make them legally disappear. Take them somewhere you'll never find them. Keep them comfortable, fed, safe, but gone. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if they're thinking about you." Diego felt cold spreading through his chest, not fear, something worse. The realization that the threat was real and specific and planned. "You would risk your family for pride?" Don Carmine said. "I would risk my life so my daughters never learn to bow." The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when someone says something unexpected. Something that changes the mathematics of the situation. Don Carmine studied Diego, really looked at him, like he was seeing something he hadn't noticed before. "You're serious," Don Carmine said. "Yes. You would die to make a point no one will remember in a week? I would die to show one person that it's possible to say no, even if that person is just my daughter, even if she's the only one who learns it." Salvatore closed the folder. "You're insane," he said. "Maybe, but I'm not controlled." Marco stood up. He looked angry now, the friendliness gone. "You think the world cares about your principles? You think anyone will remember this conversation? They'll remember us, the people who built this city, who keep it running, who make sure everything works. They'll remember that one night," Diego said. "Someone tried to score on his own goal just to prove you didn't own the game. But we do own it," Marco said. "We owned it before you. We'll own it after you maybe, but for 60 seconds tonight you didn't." Don Carmine returned to his chair, sat down, folded his hands on the desk. "You have 48 hours to leave Italy," he said. "Take your family, go back to Argentina, or go anywhere. But if you stay, we'll interpret it as a declaration of war, and we don't lose wars. What guarantee do I have you won't follow us? You don't, but I'm a businessman. Killing you would make you a martyr, a symbol. That's more dangerous than letting you leave. So you get to live. You get to take your family and pretend you won something." Diego walked to the door, his hand on the handle. He stopped, turned back. "You can fix matches," Diego said. "You can buy referees, you can threaten players, but you can't make anyone believe football is real if it isn't. And without that belief, your bets are worthless. Your control is theater, and theater only works if the audience doesn't know it's fake." He opened the door. 60 seconds, Diego said. "That's all it took to show them it's fake. Imagine what would happen if someone did it for 90 minutes. Or an entire season. Your whole system would collapse. Not because anyone beat you, because no one believed in the game anymore. Don Carmine's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. Diego walked out, through the warehouse, past the men with guns, into the Naples night, alone, but somehow not defeated. Buenos Aires. 6 weeks later, Diego sat in the grass, watching his daughters play football, in the same dirt lot where he learned the game, the same broken pavement, the same rust-stained goalposts made from pipes someone's grandfather had welded together. Dalma had the ball. She moved like water, finding spaces that shouldn't exist. Her little sister chased her. Giannina fell, got up angry, kept running. Diego smiled, the first real smile in weeks. They had left Italy 36 hours after the meeting in the warehouse. Claudia didn't ask questions. She just packed. They flew to Buenos Aires with 2 suitcases and the clothes on their backs. The club released a statement about personal reasons. Family matters. Everyone understood. Everyone pretended to believe it. The Camorra never touched his family. They kept their word on that much. But the story spread through professional football like smoke. Other players who considered standing up reconsidered. The system learned, adapted, became more sophisticated. Diego eventually returned to Italy, won championships, became a legend. But something changed in him that night. Something broke or healed. He was never sure which. He never spoke publicly about what happened, not to journalists, not to teammates, not even to Claudia. Some stories live better in silence. Dalma took a shot. The ball hit the crossbar, bounced down. She thought it went in, started celebrating. "Did it go in, Papa?" she shouted. Diego walked over, looked at where the ball had landed, just outside the line. "Close," he said. "Try again." She picked up the ball, positioned it, shot again. This time it went in clean. "Papa, did I do it right? You did it your way. That's what matters." Claudia joined him. She had been watching from the shade of an old tree, the same tree Diego used to climb when he was 7. "You never told me everything that happened that night," she said. "I told you enough. They could have killed you. They did worse. They showed me the thing I loved was built on lies. But you still play." Diego watched his daughters, watched them argue about whose turn it was, watched them laugh, watched them be children who didn't know yet how dark the world could be. "I play because somewhere," Diego said, "a kid in a slum needs to see that you can come from nothing and still be someone they can't own." Claudia took his hand. They stood together in the afternoon heat, watching their children play a game that was pure, real, uncorrupted by money or power or men who thought they controlled everything. The match was never investigated. The Camorra continued operating. The system didn't collapse. Nothing changed except Diego's understanding of it. But for 60 seconds, he proved that genius could outplay power, even if power ultimately won the war. In Naples, they still talk about the night Maradona tried to score on his own goal. Most people think it was exhaustion, confusion, a mistake. But those who were there, those who saw the 3 men in the stands and understood the silence that followed, they know the truth. Football is not always about winning. Sometimes it is about showing that you cannot be bought, even if showing it costs you everything. Diego's childhood football sat nearby, the one held together with wire, the one that should have fallen apart decades ago but refused to die. Giannina picked it up, started kicking it with her sister. The sound of children laughing, the sound of something that cannot be owned, the sound of the only victory that matters.